Welcome, everybody. Our speaker tonight is Taylor Pilote. Am I pronouncing your name wrong? Pilote. Okay, thank you. This event is part of a series of artist talks made possible through the FEP grant from Broward College Student Life. Each of the lectures will be videotaped and posted on YouTube. In addition, each of the artists will also be giving a free workshop the following day. Taylor will be facilitating a workshop tomorrow in casting objects with mold making. The workshop is free and open to the public. No experience is necessary. You'll find flyers on your seats for both the workshop, and on the flip side is also a reminder for our final visiting artist of the semester. Amy Gross will be speaking for Earth Day in April. There are also surveys on your seats. If you have time before you leave, please fill out a survey and leave it on your seat and we'll pick it up because that will help us with the grant process. Our speaker, Taylor Pilote, is originally from Niagara Falls, Canada, and earned his Bachelor of Fine Arts degree at the University of Windsor and his Master of Fine Arts degree from the University of South Florida. He has exhibited throughout the U.S. and Canada, including Scope Art Fair during Art Basel, the Museum of Fine Arts at Florida State University, and the Canadian Sculpture Center in Toronto, among others. Taylor credits his lowbrow upbringing for his sculptural aesthetic. He is a self-prescribed shop rat, having watched his father in the trade of auto body repair. In his father's shop, Taylor admired his meticulous craftsmanship and became profoundly influenced by this purity of form and the visual language of car culture. You will soon observe that he adapted and transformed these skills into sculptural techniques and often incorporates humor and social commentary. Taylor states that curiosity, desire, and fear have become a large point of interest within my practice. The slick, seductive finish of automotive urethane invokes desire. The uncanny use of material creates a strong sense of curiosity. The product becomes a catalyst for thought through pointed material choices. Please join me in welcoming Taylor Pilote.
Hello, everybody. I'm Taylor, obviously. Thank you, Lisa and Broward College, for having me here. Like I said, or like Lisa said, I was born in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. BFA at the University of Windsor, which is right across from Detroit, and then finally coming here, or Tampa, to the University of South Florida for sculpture and extended media. I work in at USF now and live in Tampa for a company called Graphic Studio, which is a collaborative artist atelier. So we bring in big name artists and we work one-on-one with them to make artwork. So that's my day job, and then I leave the studio there and I go to my studio in Tampa and work late. I came from 3 generations deep of what I would like to call a shop rat, where we were always in the shop and everything we did revolved around cars, motorcycles, really anything with a motor. But it started with my grandfather. In the 6th grade, he was kicked out of school. At 16, he owned one of 3 gas stations in my small town. At 18, he and 3 friends drunkenly rowed a canoe down a hill into a cop car, and I guess that started where he worked with auto body out of necessity. He had a gas station before that. My father likewise dropped out of school in the 10th grade and went to trade school to follow in his father's footsteps to become an automotive body man. This is him down in your lower left. So I'm the next generation of that shop rat. I'm obviously on your right, and that's my father, my brother, and I. That's a 72 Chevy. I own one myself now that I'm building currently. So my parents, instead of paying for daycare, took turns watching my brother and I at their respective places of work. My mom's being the hair salon and my dad being the shop, obviously. The latter became the obvious preference for both my brother and I. So I kind of grew up literally in the shop. my first in-depth interaction with the use of material, shape, form, color resulted in direct contact with automobiles, as you can see. So my father, like Lisa said, he's a meticulous craftsman, and he kind of awed me in the way that he could transform material and control it with his metalwork and then his slick, seductive finishes that we would put on the cars and motorcycles. So he can be credited for not only my love of cars and motorcycle culture, but my engagement with that as a custom culture, as well as the technical skill set that I learned along the way. My formal art education in sculpture began with the interest in using that same skill set in a vastly different way. My undergraduate program at the University of Windsor was like really highly technical and material based. So it encouraged the use of material vigorously without any constraint of utility. Like, you know, if we were building a car, we were building it for someone and it had to be useful. Whereas this skill set was kind of like open. So as most beginners, this meant emulating others, whether I knew it or not. So the resulting sculptures, even through my advanced work, like this is one of my advanced BFA works, they resembled people like Anthony Caro and Joel Shapiro, both who I have great respect for, but for different reasons now. So you can see these, I mean, the image on your right, if you Googled Joel Shapiro, I didn't know him at the time, like this could be one of his works, which I also fumbled through as I was learning more contemporary artists. So I was working with exploring mass, weight, space, finish, and at that time through the use of industrial materials, realistically the cheapest materials that I can get a hold of. So in this case, concrete and scrap metal. So I was aestheticizing discarded materials in a kind of curious way and trying to figure out where my place was. But my interest in the work only seemed to last as long as the physical labor persisted, and like once that was finished, they kind of fell short, and it didn't like seem that it had any connection to who I was or where I came from. Especially when it came time to show the work. They just kind of felt lifeless and mundane, like a lot of formal work from the 60s, 50s. So Build and Burn was a show exhibiting work inspired by the decline of Windsor as a city due to its heavy reliance on Detroit as an automotive-based sector. This piece, titled "My Father Used to Make a Decent Living Selling Used Cars," was one of my finished concrete works, which you saw in the last slide, literally smashed through the roof of a '93 Ford Escort. The piece not only became a literal vehicle to show the work itself, but it spoke to me with a sense of emotion that has always stuck with me. Marcel Duchamp talked about art not happening in the eye, but happening inches behind your eye, like as a thought in your brain. And this kind of changed from being an object that sat there that you contemplated, but using the object as a material in relation to another object to create an idea rather than like a situation, rather than just a stagnant object, so that you could continue, or you can start making an argument based on the interacting materials. And that kind of got me interested in pushing material as a visual language in different ways. So this simple gesture of literally crushing two clashing facets of my life, the automotive side and then the art culture, allowed my work to transcend materiality and allow more of the message to prevail rather than, like I said, just the stagnant object. So upon graduating, I traveled south to Florida, in Tampa, obviously attending USF for grad school. So whether out of anxiety or habit, I reverted kind of the same methods and materials that I was using in my undergrad. So I mean, they got a little bit more curious and precarious, but they kind of still had no ties to me or my experience of culture. So in this piece in particular, I had a comment that like really stuck with me. I was told, it's nice. I think a lot of people would like this in their garden. And that wasn't exactly what I moved 1,300 miles to make. So we kind of vastly switched after that. It was somebody I really respect, and they said it honestly. So I was perturbed. So moving on, as I started continuing with contemporary culture and contemporary artists and artist work, like I said, my undergrad wasn't very conceptual. It was very material based. So USF was kind of a nice balance between both. So I started looking at different types of work that kind of suited my aesthetic. The custom work of Ruben Ortiz Torres, in a way, gave place to my automotive interests within the art world. On the left here is a piece called High and Low Rider from 2008, which is a hydraulically customized utility lift. So it embodies the typical features of a lowrider car from lowrider culture in like LA, say. So it can be lifted, lowered, tilted, unfolded, and spun like a pinwheel. On the right, a piece called Power Tools #1 from 1999, and it's an industrial leaf blower that's been candy painted and gold plated and customized, and kind of comments on the socio-political relationship between migrant workers from Mexico, which Torres is from, and the lowrider culture in LA. So he's kind of batting these things back and forth with a little bit of wit, but like stereotypical honesty as well. Other works like Patricia Piccinini's Stags, they utilize automotive aesthetics. In this piece specifically, customized scooters. So they push and pull the masculine and feminine and utilize material choices that become a platform for cultural critique, which I'm genuinely interested in. I saw these specifically 2 years ago at Basel, and they're exquisite. They're perfect. Also artists like Liz Cohen, she makes work, she has no background in the culture, but she kind of totally immersed herself in it. What you see here is a piece called Bodywork. She transformed a German car, which is called a Trabant, into a '73 Chevy El Camino. So as a sculpture, the car is able to morph back and forth between the German car and the El Camino by a set of gears and hydraulics. So you can see on the right there, that's it extended and getting to the length. So the aesthetics are still of the Trabant, but it becomes the same scale and dimensions of what a El Camino would be. So as part of the project, she hired a trainer and then dieted to be shown in a bikini as the model for the work. So she kind of, like I said, totally immersed herself in it. And so she promoted the project, going to lowrider shows with the car as both builder and model. So also pulling on this kind of masculine, feminine. In addition to those contemporary artists, I'm also like deeply ingrained in automotive culture, like I told you. So a very background of custom references. This is the late Indian Larry, who's a motorcycle builder from New York. He died doing exactly what he's doing on the bottom right there, or bottom left doing. So like, but on your right, he's known for this specific type of down tube in the frame there. You can see it's actually an 1.5 inch piece of steel that's heated and twisted back and forth. So you kind of get this like really free form object. So all of his bikes have these really, really whacked out, aesthetic only, non-functional beauty points to them, which in some instances I bring up in question, and some that they just seem that they need to be there no matter what. Also, the cartoons, drawings, and otherworldly fiberglass custom cars of Ed Big Daddy Roth. So this is one of his cars. on the top left, and that's his signature character, Ratfink, on the bottom right. The watercolors and paintings, and most recently sculpture from Robert Williams. On the left, probably one of my favorite paintings. It is my favorite painting of his, called Hot Rod Race from 1976. And then on the right, it's a fiberglass sculpture from 2009 called Diamond in a Goat's Ass. But I lovingly refer to it as Diamond Donkey Butt. I think it flows better. But that specifically, it's interesting for me to see somebody who I really like for their comics, watercolors, paintings, and then coming up with these kind of funky sculptures that are fiberglass that have similar finishes to me. My intent in the work obviously is to balance material with the conceptual, where the chosen material embodies the chosen concept, like I was talking about earlier. So like I kind of titled the talk, I enjoyed, the next person who I'm going to give you a quote from is Dave Hickey. In '97, he wrote, or came out with a book called Air Guitar. That's a series of art-based essays, but they're kind of cultural essays that are amazing. I think if you haven't read that, you should read it, regardless of what you make or where you're from. So I'm going to read a little bit from that, actually. So Hickey kind of echoes exactly where I come from and what I'm doing in this. So Hickey says, "For me, cars were not just art, they were everything. None of the schools I attended as we gypsied around the American West were ever that great, nor ever quite real to me. So much secondary education as I received in the physical culture of cars. Everywhere I found myself, kids bought them, talked them, drew them, dreamed them, hopped them up and dropped them down, cruised them on the drag and dragged them on the highway, as I did too. Thus, of necessity, I learned car math and car engineering and car poli-sci and car economics, car anthropology and car beaux-arts. Even my first glimmerings of higher theory arose out of that culture. The rhetoric of the image and icon, the dynamics of embodied desire, the algorithms of style change, the ideological force of disposable income, all these came to me couched in the lingua franca of cars, arose out of our perpetual exegesis of nuanced context and iconography. As it was worth the trouble, because all of us who partook in this discourse, as artists, critics, collectors, mechanics, and citizens, understood the politico-aesthetic implications, understood that we were voting with cars for a fresh idea of democracy, a new canon of beauty, and a redeemed ideology of motion. We understood that we were dissenting when we customized them and hopped them up, demonstrating against the standards of the Republic and advocating our own refined vision of power and loveliness. Now, he gets a little romantic there and a little maybe deep at the end, but that's exactly where, like when I read this, it was like a mirror of what I was thinking and what I was going through in grad school. I guess I'll come back. I'm going to give one more quote from the same article. I think it's dead on for what I'm talking about and what my work is. So after the hierarchy of the cubes, the garden piece, I like to call it, my second piece in grad school, I took, like I said, a complete 180-degree material approach. I tried to utilize fully my skill set from the auto body shop as it served the automotive culture, and this is kind of what I started with. Using Craigslist as a material jump-off point, I still do that today. I'll sometimes get spurred into making a project based on what I can readily get on Craigslist, especially if it fits my need really quickly. I love Craigslist. I probably buy 90% of the things not 90, that's silly, but. So the project critiqued the fuel crisis and my direct contributions to it through like auto racing, gas guzzling hot rod culture, motorcycle culture. So that transformed into kind of laboriously polishing these barrels as symbols of consumption, and that transformed them into these kind of fetish objects that were slick and seductive, like a lot of my work. So it kind of mimicked the cultural prestige of the crude oil that I was kind of talking about, and our need for it. So the one barrel's carelessly knocked over, revealing a golden puddle golden puddle in all of its nonchalant and wasteful beauty. The seductive finish suggests our cultural desire to have. For the first time, I guess this would be the piece that I could feel really comfortable, and I could stand behind it both in its materiality as well as its culturally relevant material. So thinking about it as this kind of beautiful object, but then carrying along with it this like conceptual weight to it that's kind of balances that need with kind of an offsetting guilty feel to like us as a consumer culture. Carrying the momentum forward in the same vein, this was a show called Not Over Easy. It was a solo show in Tampa, and I explored the same issues, but in a wide variety of materials. In this show, I guess I would say the pinnacle of the show was this set of hand-formed steel sculptures, and their title is Poor Estimation. So two on the upper left, they kind of pour over the pedestal that supports them, and then the third kind of stands suggesting malleability because of the kind of drippy nature of it, but it's curiously erect. So like that piece, obviously you can see that backside that hangs down, that was on it, I welded it on a table and it just sits by itself. So that underneath part is completely empty. This piece is the best one for me to describe what I consider a happy accident in work. You know, I spent hours and hours making these things form to this table, and the third one, as you get deeper into the process and you kind of have your blinders on, you're just making, and I actually slid it out so that I can do some welding underneath, and it stood on its own. So like at some point you can't take credit for something that happens like that, just like kind of putting your head into like your process, and then kind of weird, awesome, happy accidents happen. So I can take credit for doing the work, but I did not think that was going to happen at first. And I think that's okay to be all right with. So the material juxtaposition investigated the imminent disaster of the oil spill. At that time, it was right around that time that just happened. I had just gotten back from Paris, and like while I was in Paris, that happened, and I was thinking of these things like pretty readily, especially being on the Gulf Coast and liking to fish and do other things. The act of melting as a slow, controlled demise was becoming a reoccurring feel. So you saw it in the first prize, the piece before, and now here, and you'll kind of see it move on. But this probably most conceptually fitting for this kind of spill. Poor estimation as being like not understanding how much oil was being spilt, and so like from the left to the right, it kind of grows from this one barrel to a 2-barrel system to this kind of like all-encompassing floor piece that kind of moves along. Scapegoat, I might not talk too long about this, but because I'm talking about using a lot of different materials, it's a set of 100 glass jars that had Gulf water in it and crude oil on the top. So they kind of looked like, they kind of became these like vacation knickknacks that you would like maybe see coming to Florida and then taking home like a jar of sand or something. Each one of them had little facts and figures that kind of placed the blame back on us as a culture rather than like putting it on the name of like say BP or things like that. So it was small things like, you know, one drop of oil creates a slick on the water the size of a 2-car garage. It was like there was these things that were like leveling what happened then and like why we should probably point the blame equally on ourselves. So conceptually you would kind of take a piece back with you, but you're like kind of taking this little souvenir of guilt. No Attraction past this point is a photo project that I did that's obviously a little bit lighthearted and pokes fun at our consumer culture by kind of putting the blinders on to our enjoyment of our natural surroundings, but also our blatant disregard for it. So this is me with a gas can on my head over and over and over in the Gulf. It's pretty large, 44 by 84, it's a big print. Next, inability to wean is a fuel hose protruding from the wall. You can see with the clamps it's attempting to be pinched off, but not quite. And the total amount of the pennies came out to $80.25, which was the cost of a barrel of crude oil on the day that the show opened. So there was like kind of this ephemeral quality to like what was happening right then to why I was doing this show. That was October 2010. That's just another installation view of the gallery. Shortly later, I started working on a piece called Brown Sound, which actually I just recently finished due to putting it aside for other things. But this project dug deeper in towards the automotive culture that I was enamored with. The idea was first drawn from that ridiculously loud bass at a stoplight that you would have. So at a stoplight, you'd hear bass, and you could kind of look around, and based on aesthetic cues, you can decide which vehicle it's coming from. So I'm kind of like trying to like set that up as a situation in the gallery. So this is, I start kind of questioning a few different things with this piece, like that, the bass at the stoplights, the utility or lack thereof of automotive upgrades, I guess you would call them, and then the physical ability of low bass tones to make someone defecate. So that all wraps into like the Brown Sound idea. So it's the project itself is a fusion of a 1950s Frigidaire in-wall oven, like you would see in your. This one literally came out of my aunt's house in Clearwater. So the built-ins that I'm talking about, and then the fiberglass enclosure that I made around the outside is indicative of like the auto sound industry, like you would have subs in your trunk, and then this 1,000-watt stereo system. So when it plays, I think you can see the square subwoofer inside of it with the neon lights. So it plays bass, it kind of like shitty trunk rattle, and then like this kind of marvelous brown paint job, which this is not the right color. I painted it again, and you can see it here, but I'll come back to it. And then it's like this uncanny blob of a retro oven. So there, like I was telling you about this, the title of my talk, which I'll get to in a little bit, like wow, like you don't understand what it is, but then it unfolds and like you become like enthralled with why, or yeah, definitely why. So Brown Sound questions the line between masculine and feminine. Obviously, you know, it's more stereotypical for a male to be pumping money into souping up a vehicle, but you know, the female side of the stereotype of kind of being more in the kitchen. So I'm throwing that together, just as if when I grew up, when I was in my mom's hair salon and then my father's shop, like 2 days apart, and it's like this kind of pull back and forth. So it questions masculine, feminine, form versus function, all while the title evoked questions of race stereotypes and also implied the ability for the noise to induce a bodily function. I am going to, I think I can get this to work. So this is when I had it installed, or when I had it installed just almost finished and getting the electrical work. It's not the speaker, but those are not bad. right. So this is Brown Sound in its finished state, which I finished, like I said, finished earlier, or the end of last year. So Brown Sound is the material and conceptual connection I was kind of looking for in my work all the way up until now. So it worked for me on several ways. First of all, the surface finish satisfied my three-dimensional expectations, both like materially and aesthetically. Second, it investigated a number of intricacies of both like the art world situation in a gallery and contemporary automotive culture, kind of creating these levels of meaning. So as if you had knowledge of these things coming from the street, being interested in it, or coming down and thinking about it in relation to other pieces of artwork that you've seen that are kind of like that. And then lastly, it kind of forced the viewer to interact spatially between the kind of fetish nature of the object and then the kind of unsettling sensation of being there. Obviously, like as Mythbusters have told us, like you can't make someone shit themselves with face, but the idea is still there. And so as a gallery piece, Brown Sound kind of first steals your attention through its aesthetics, and you kind of come up to it like you would check out a car and look in and see under and things like that. And you may or may not come in at a time when it's playing, so you don't necessarily know. And then you get to kind of enjoy the rest of the work. And if you're like looking at a painting and then this thing goes off, it kind of steals your attention back, just like the car at the stoplight. So it gets the viewer interacting more on a one-to-one, like me versus art, rather than like I'm going to impose my knowledge on this work. So it like I said, it's kind of the amalgamation of what I was trying to get at. Moving on, I think I work in very different ways. I think I have streams of work that go one way and streams of work that go the other way, and I think it's nice because all the time I spend making things, it's nice to be able to wait for primer to dry on one thing and then move over to like something a little bit different. So I returned from another Art Basel, which I was annoyed at the overabundance of what's called an infinity mirror. Do you know what infinity mirrors are? They're like a mirror and they have LED lights in them and they have two mirrors so that it looks like it's perpetually tunnel of neon. I saw like hundreds of them and I was like weirded out because I thought they were terrible. But no matter what color they were, or neon, or different colors, it was bad. So I started on this piece, which is called Restaurant's Best. There's no place like home. Essentially, it's a bar top pedestal that houses this polished chrome or polished bronze chicken wing that's cast in faux finished cast plastic. So the glass top allows the viewer to look down in to a seemingly endless supply of Miller High Life cans. So when you look at it, the double mirror situation just looks like it's a beer tunnel forever. And then kind of on the other end of that, the hybrid pedestal, like slash Hooters bar table, I like to call it, is like this homage to, which is my favorite food, which is chicken wings. I grew up right near Buffalo. My dad lives in Buffalo, and I eat chicken wings a lot. So it touches on like my upbringing and my values while injecting some cultural stereotypes, kind of like the wooden clad Hooters interior kind of bar top. So for me, the chicken wing is kind of like a working man's caviar. They're kind of scrap meats. You have to work to get meat off the bone, and you get messy doing it. Oops. And we do this, I say we, talking about like, I guess mostly men in these kind of restaurants, kind of talking about artwork or sports first, booze, women, and in my case, art with some of my buddies. There's one literally across from my studio that is a meeting point just because it's there and they sell beer. So in my talk, I'm gonna use 2 Urban Dictionary definitions because it's always reliable. And a restaurant via Urban Dictionary says a male-oriented restaurant where servers' bodacious natural cleavage is never on the menu but is always in voluminous supply. So this, this became something that, as growing up in the shop, we would leave at 5 and go have a beer and go to a place. In Florida, that place became these kind of weird chain restaurants because there wasn't like this hometown guy that did it. So they became these weird, and they're like on every fourth corner or something in Tampa. So also begging the question of like, why Miller High Life? But I asked the question, like, what does it mean to promote one of the cheapest beers on the market as the champagne of beers? And I would say that it means the same thing as raising like a lowly chicken wing, casting it for no reason, and then laboriously polishing it as like this item of desire. So I kind of as in custom culture, you kind of defy these class hierarchies by putting elbow grease in and making things better. In the 50s, custom car culture started from not being able to own a Cadillac, but being able to buy a Chevrolet and work on it yourself and make it cooler than the Cadillac. And that's kind of where I came from, and that's kind of where I was going satirically with this piece. The next one, this piece is called They See Me Rollin'. It spins off the same kind of interest as Brown Sound, and like I said, I move in different facets, but this is kind of more down the appliance line, I would say. So this piece is it's a functional General Electric dryer, and it perpetually spins this 20-inch rim inside of it. So where Brown Sound investigated stoplight base, this one kind of more looks into the Southern cultural idea of what's considered a donk, which I'm very enamored with. I think they're crazy and awesome. So once again, I'm going to go to Urban Dictionary, because I said it's always reliable. Donk, any POS 80s or early 90s American heap, preferably an Impala, that has large enough wheels installed until it resembles and rides and handles like a Conestoga wagon. This is done so it sits up high enough so as to be at the same level as playas with real juice in their Escalades. Adding a bad candy paint job and Walmart sub box completes the transformation. With no money left over for necessary suspension and brake upgrades, the lifespan is limited to a few drug runs or the first police chase, whichever occurs first. Used in a sentence, that donk is fly and riding high. These things are like beautiful. Like I can't make something up better than this. In my second slide, you see me, I'm building a 68 hot rod that like literally sits on the ground and lifts back up with air ride. Like at the same time, why would somebody do that? And it's like this little notion of everyday life where people are making aesthetic decisions as an artist and not knowing it. I think that there's like interesting like stereotypes that come out of it, and interesting things that you would choose for no other reason than if they were a trend, or if you genuinely thought they were cool, or what does it mean to instead of buying a $7,000 vehicle, buy a $800 vehicle and put $5,000 rims on it. Like I think if everybody did that, we might have a little bit more of an interesting visual life. It might look like this. So conceptually, like I said, I asked myself, what does it mean to soup up an old Chevy Impala and why? And what's different about doing that to another utilitarian object like a dryer or an oven? So coming up with these things, I started asking myself the question a lot, why this, not that? Whether it be culturally and then in the art world, or why the art world and not culture. So watching this piece run as a viewer, you become much less interested in the object and much more interested in its function. So like from a photo, you're interested in for that reason, but like it totally, when you're watching, it doesn't really matter what it looks like anymore. Like it's this kind of perpetual motion that's really interesting. So do I have, I think it's, yeah, it's on this one, I think. Sorry, I can't see the link. So I just give you short clips of these things because they need to be So that's that piece. Whoops. Because I'm on last slide, I talked about kind of this question of why this and not that. I kind of bring up the sister piece to Restaurants Best, which kind of also asks the question why this and not that. It's called Take One Down, obviously from the take one down, pass it around kind of innuendo, but on the back end, the blue collar McElhaney. I made this as a kind of as the second Infinity Beer piece. It's a dimensionally correct version of this work by Josiah McElhaney that's titled Modernity Circa 1952, Mirrored and Reflected Infinitely. He made his in 2004, and I made mine in 2012, kind of with a blue collar twist. So this piece kind of questions why a silver nitrate dipped glass cast ornament instead of like ice cold PBRs. So as you can see, this one has really only 2 deep PBRs, but they kind of seemingly go forever into the wall. Again, spinning off of the kind of infinity mirror kind of piece. This piece is called Ass Gas or Cash. It stands over 12 feet tall. The base on the bottom is like 4 foot wide by almost 8 foot long. It is materially derivative of a few other projects. Obviously, you can see the melting slow demise coming out in this piece as well. It has a lot of cultural signifiers all over it. On the right-hand side there, you can see a cast Bondo drinking cup from, say, McDonald's. So kind of the slick finish juxtaposed against the kind of grit of like cast garbage, used tires. It creates this kind of contradictory feel where you're interested in it because of its seductive finish and its aesthetics, but then as you kind of move closer to it, it kind of unravels with this kind of urban cultural detritus. So the desire to reach out and touch the shiny object is corralled by its negative overtones of mass consumption and pollution. For me, I guess I was looking at different odd works. This is Michelangelo Pistoletto's Venus of the Rags, where the denuncification of the figure faced into this kind of heap of ragged clothing reads as kind of this failed heroic past and like this kind of trajectory toward this like overwhelmingly ragged future, which is kind of a bummer, but it's also kind of true. Especially like the things that I'm dealing with and working on, you know, is it better to restore my 70 Chevy or is it better to go and buy a Prius? And my argument on that is that the Prius factory is pumping out more than my Chevy will ever do or any hot rod will ever do. So I kind of pull and push these kind of things. So it's kind of monochrome with this flamed paint job at the top, and that paint job kind of overlays all of these hierarchy, and it kind of like levels the hierarchy from in the center kind of like stomach area, there's like these cast or these dyed, black dyed American dollar bills, trash, like I said, the styrofoam containers and the drinking cup, the gasoline cans, the motorcycle tanks at the top, and then this kind of whole mess is restrained by this thick chrome chain and what are considered truck nuts on the floor there. They're a cultural phenomenon where big lifted trucks drive around and you can buy these cast truck nuts. They look like testicles and they hang from the trailer hitch ball. Another beautiful cultural situation that happens for God knows why, but it's amazing. I didn't make those. I bought those straight out. On them, their logo and their number is on them. You can call and order them right from there. I will not take credit for that. Are they? I got a set. My truck's parked at, no, just. So from afar, the viewer is seduced, like I said, from this towering sculpture's presence and its slick paint job. But as the viewer proceeds, the information unfolds, raising kind of more questions than it gives answers. And I think that's overall my view of what's awesome about artwork is that it doesn't necessarily have to give you answers, but it raises more questions and at least gets us thinking in a certain way. So like I said, creating this like wow moment where you're interested and then you think about it and kind of it flip-flops back and forth. I'm going to give you a quick, this is just a quick walk around of that piece because it's very difficult when you have a big black sculpture to get the dimension of it in a photograph because it all kind of like white, like kind of washes out black. So this is kind of three-dimensional all the way around it in the gallery. Like I said, the cast, I came up with a way to be able to liquefy Bondo, which is an automotive filler, more thinly so that I can actually pour it and cast with it. And then it's like ready to be sanded and painted. So it's something that growing up, like we used a ton of Bondo, but now I use like infinitely more. So I'm trying different ways with it. I also own this painting in the background and it's awesome. My buddy Biff. There's the truck nuts. They're 16 inches. It's big. So you can see in the middle there, like the bottom tire is a polished tire, like clean tire. The two in the center are actually fiberglass replicas, and they're automotive painted. So there's kind of this like nice hierarchy. In my pieces, when you look aesthetically, there's kind of material decisions that I would make just as if I was making on a vehicle of like, okay, this kind of more gritty, shiny rubber looks really nice against this really slick black fiberglass. So I don't really talk about how the things are made necessarily because that's not necessarily what I'm genuinely interested in. I'm kind of interested in the hierarchy of the meanings, but so if you look at them closer, it's nice to see it in the round so you kind of understand what it's looking like. What did I do here? Perfect. And I'm pretty good on time too. These most recently, I've been kind of working. I moved into my studio, and in the interim, I didn't have a studio, so I was working at work. It sounds funny, but I was working on my personal work at my place of work, and so I was kind of thinking smaller. These are a series of wall sculptures. I consider the Harley Earl series. So again, I'm going to come back to Dave Hickey and give you a little bit of a quote that incorporates what Harley Earl is, and that is an excerpt of what I'll be reading. So, it says, Hickey says, so to return to the lingua franca of cars, we should remember that America's industrial base, at its automotive industry particularly, came out of World War II in great shape. Its production potential was greatly expanded. Its technology much improved. Thus, American industry found itself facing the challenge that has confronted every artist since Watteau, that of a finite demanding market for a necessary overabundant supply of speculative products. First, companies introduce hierarchies of lines. As an artist might produce prints, drawings, and paintings, American manufacturers began introducing economy and luxury lines to bracket their mid-range product, thus creating a possibility of the consumer moving up without moving out. Second, and again like artists in the 19th century, these manufacturers began designing visual obsolescence into their products by institutionalizing style change. In this way, manufacturers hope to create a cyclical demand for their products by shifting emphasis from their value or utility to their extrinsic currency by having one style supplant the other. And finally, American businesses stopped advertising products for what they were or for what they could do, but began advertising them for what they meant as assigned systems within the broader culture, emphasizing what every collector wants to know, who owned them and where they were owned. So it's this moment where, after World War II, where it went from being I want a car to I want that car, and there's like this kind of stylistic change to be like, this is not a utilitarian object anymore, this could be an aesthetic piece of artwork necessarily. So he goes on to say the Leonardo of this new art market was an ex-custom car designer from Hollywood named Harley Earl, who headed the design division of General Motors during the post-war period. Earl's most visible and legendary contributions to American culture were the Cadillac tail fin, based on the tail assembly of a P-38 fighter plane, and the pastel paint job. Design innovations that, when combined, as they often were, simultaneously masculinized and femininized the American automobile, translating it into a distinct, all-purpose, polymorphous object of desire in the best tradition of the Rococo. Basically, what Earl invented was a market situation in which the consumer moved up the status ladder within the cosmology of General Motors products, from Chevrolet to Pontiac to Buick to Oldsmobile to Cadillac, as the tail fin and some other contagious motifs moved down in the price ladder from Cadillac to Chevrolet year by year as styles changed incrementally. So what I was talking about earlier is of not being able to own the Cadillac, but being able to make the Chevy just as cool with elbow grease. They were kind of backlogging these things. So if Cadillac came out with it in '59, then the Pontiac might get it in '60, and they kind of slowly go down from there. But the hierarchy always having the newest, coolest things. So the Harley Earl series utilizes the most recognizable taillights and tail fins from the 50s and late 40s. So if you can imagine the skin of the car being grabbed from the headlights and torn down the side to the tail fins and then kind of hung up on a coat hook, not if like to discard them, but kind of like hang them up for later use. So these years probably were arguably the most prosperous for America. So that like when America was built on craftsmanship and class and brawn and muscle. And nowadays, whether they're permanently linked or not, the economy kind of takes a swoop down, and I would say that our sense of style in vehicles do as well. Maybe most recently turning up for the better, but not nearly as close. So these pieces hang almost as reminders to like what we can do or what's available to us if we put craftsmanship in what we do and style, because that's what we were founded on. So as an homage to Harley Earl, these finned pieces, I titled them each either with the full slogan or close to the slogan of their sales campaigns when they came out. So the first one here is named Majesty. In '59, the Cadillacs came out marketed as Motoring Majesty. Blue Ribbon Beauty, this is a white '56 Chevrolet, which was introduced as such, as Blue Ribbon Beauty. And Seventh Heaven, which is a '57 Ford in a typical Ford kind of pale green color, teal color, which was introduced as Seventh Heaven on wheels. That was their marketing slogan for this car. So that's a series of them together. And then my latest piece that I just finished this December, it was at Basel. It's in East Hampton right now in New York in a show. It's called Slab Side Slide. So this one's actually pre-50s. It's a 49 Ford. And the slab side in 48 vehicles had where their doors were closer together and their fenders bubbled out. In 4950, Ford was the first one that the quarter panel from the fender all the way back to the tail fins.
The library and research center will be closing in 30 minutes. If you need to attend the library card to check out materials, please apply for one at this time.
Yes. I don't need to check anything out actually. But if air guitar is there, you should get it. So it became, those cars, the 49 Ford it was considered a slab side because it was kind of thick all the way down the side. So kind of coming off of the wall back to a three-dimensional object on the floor. You know, sculpture is that thing that you make that people trip over when they're looking at paintings. That's this piece in a nutshell. And it brings back the tires that were in Ask, Gas, or Cash, and kind of wraps up where I am. I'm currently finishing up 2 more of the wall pieces and actually working with a collector, and we are making a wall of 12 dryers. So the green piece that we have, if you can think about an outdoor laundromat, if you walk up to like the wall of like washers and dryers, so we'll have 12, 3 high and 4 wide of multicolored spinning rims like that. So that's what I'm working on. Thank you very much.
So just as a reminder, Taylor has a free workshop tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and he can tell you about that real briefly, but if anybody has questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, if anybody's coming for sure tomorrow, I brought things that we can cast, but if you have a small object, not that we can get to everybody's object, but if you bring an object, we can cast a specific object that you have. I brought some, but you might want something specific.
Where is it? It's in the ceramic studio just right across the sidewalk here, building 60, at 2 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah, the thing says 2:30, but I'll be there before 2.
It doesn't say, but it's supposed to say 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Does anybody have questions about his work or concept?
Thank you very much.
You must have covered it really well.
We'll hope. Thanks. Thank you.